to another great guest, KJ No. KJ No. How you doing, KJ? You doing okay?
I'm doing well. Happy to be with you.
Oh man, I always appreciate you. The audience loves you. KJ No, he's a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region, contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon, now available at iacenter.org. You can also find him on what is the name of the network?
The China Report, that's YouTube, the Breakthrough News Network on YouTube, and the show that I host is called The China Report.
Excellent, excellent. Check him out. They love you on the show, KJ. I love the conversation. You always illuminate me on something. Today is an interesting day. Yesterday, Donald Trump came out, I think it was his 100th day or something to that effect, and effectively said, we are lowering the sanctions, the tariffs. We can't keep them at the level we're going to keep them. We're going to make a deal with China, Xi Jinping. And what's weird about that is I have not been able to find anything that says that Trump has made any kind of phone call to Xi Jinping for them to have this conversation. Vincent has come out saying, behind the scenes, these tariffs are unsustainable. We can't keep them up. And we need to effectively stop doing this. Now, this is obviously informing Trump's point of view when he's coming out making this grand statement of, we need to stop doing this. The market is dropping like 1,000 points today. The dollar has been collapsing in regards to value. I think it's dropped like 10%. Everything is more expensive in regards to tariffs, or for that matter, because of the dollar devaluing. And I don't see this happening in China. Like, meaning Xi Jinping didn't make a panicky video saying, well, we're stopping the thing. They've been escalating day after day. We're no longer taking your beef. Maybe we're not going to buy U.S. treasuries. We're no longer taking your movies. Oh, by the way, your grain, we're no longer going to take that either. One thing after the next, effectively saying, we will fight this to the bitter end. If China collapses, then damn it collapses. We are not going to take the backseat to you. And obviously, it's not collapsing. They've gone up, like 4.5% the last quarter. Give me your take on this. I mean, this is effectively the president capitulating because he had to capitulate. The markets didn't allow him, meaning he didn't have the power that he thought he did, the economic power, the economic might to do what he wanted to do in regards to either China and potentially the rest of the world, because China's been going around having a charm offensive to that rest of the world to try to get them to say you should stand up against the U.S. doing this nonsense. Give me your take on this. What's the thought in China on, A, the tariffs in general, but B, Trump's response here in regards to needing to back down?
Well, in China, they're largely ignoring it. They're doing fine. They've largely already, began the process of decoupling since the first Trump administration. And now that Trump came out with this huge threat, they called his bluff. And Trump has had to fold his cards, and they can see that, he has nothing. And as for negotiating with China, no, the Trump administration is negotiating with itself, right? It's talking amongst itself. There's absolutely no evidence that there's been any negotiation with China. So the Trump administration is simply talking to itself, but they have understood, as Besant has said, that this is unsustainable, that it's Besant himself said on Reuters that, or according to Reuters, Besant said, negotiations with Beijing have not yet started. Okay, so Trump is not playing, 4D chess. He's negotiating with himself, and he's destroying the business environment. He's destroying the stock market and the bond market and the value of the dollar. And essentially, he's shown himself up, that he doesn't have the cards. And so, for me, when I think of this is a little bit like, perhaps this is an inappropriate analogy, but when Mike Tyson was young, when he was 7 years old, he was small, skinny, and clearly a very sweet kid. He wore glasses and had a lisp. And if you listen to Mike Tyson now, he still has a little bit of a lisp, but apparently he was really bullied. And at one point, a bully, tried to take his lunch and took his glasses and threw them away. And, he was really humiliated. And 4 years later, at the age of 11, he was fighting adults, professional boxers, bare knuckle, and beating them into the ground. And then he met Customato, if you
Yeah.
think of Russia as Customato, Anyway, so I mean, I think there's something that drove Mike Tyson, which was this raging anger, never to be humiliated again. And I think, again, analogies always break down, but I think there's something inside the Chinese spirit which does not want itself to be taken down and humiliated, as it has in the past, from the 1800s up
Right.
to 1949. I mean, it was ripped apart by the Western colonial powers. It
Wow.
fought decades of war against the Japanese. 27 million Chinese died. And then as soon as they were liberated, they had to go to war with the United States during the Korean War.
North Korea.
3 million Chinese fought in the Korean War. And at the time, when the U.S. When the war broke out, U.S. was sure that it would just be a walkover. It would be a cakewalk, and that the U.S. troops would be back by Christmas. Well, Christmas came and went. Nothing happened. But what did happen was the Chinese warned the U.S. Do not cross the 38th parallel, and the U.S. did, because they were just going to drive all the way up to the Yalu. The Chinese said, no, you can't do that. And the U.S. National Security class, they laughed at it, because China was one of the poorest, literally one of the poorest countries on the planet, and it had just fought, as I said, decades of war with Japan, and also a civil war, 27 million people dead, and they knew that China was incapable of fighting what the U.S. had demonstrated after World War II was the most powerful military machine on the planet.
Mhm.
Well, what happened was that the Chinese crossed the Yalu, and they crossed it very discreetly. And the U.S. was constantly monitoring the border, and they said, "Oh, no way the Chinese can get in here." The daily, surveillance flights. 500,000 Chinese crossed the Yalu into North Korea completely undetected. The US said, maybe there are a few thousand, maybe 10,000, 50,000. They didn't realize that 500,000 Chinese had crossed the Yalu at night, completely camouflaged, and then they hit the US 8th Army first once, and it was just a gentle tap. And then they vanished. And the US said, oh, that's it, that's nothing. We're going to continue advancing north. And then the Chinese hit again. And this was probably the greatest blow to the US military in its history, and the longest retreat in its history. And I assure you, the 8th Army still talks about this, with a tremor in its voice. It's been the greatest shock to the US military in its military history. That first tap was like when you're hammering a nail, you tap the nail first, and then the second blow is what drives it in. And the Chinese demonstrated that they're not to be trifled war. After that, General MacArthur said, anybody who wants to fight a land war in Asia has to have their head examined. And I think the same thing applies. Anybody who wants to fight a trade war with China needs to have their head examined.
I cannot think of the general that saved my life, but it's the one that used to, very iconic pipe. He was fired.
MacArthur, General MacArthur.
Wasn't he fired for that?
Yes, he was fired because he was going rogue, and he
Yeah.
was, overstepping his mandate. So yes, so he was fired. But yes, he was he was running the show during the
Yeah.
Korean War.
Eisenhower had sense enough to be like, "What the hell are you doing? Stop doing that."
Yeah.
This is the clip when he's talking about China. This is why I thought, and I wasn't sure. There was, let's say, social media reporting that a meeting was scheduled between Trump and Xi Jinping in May. And the way Donald Trump is talking about this, he's talking about it as if there is a meeting, which is maybe is why social media took that mantle. As I said, I wasn't able to confirm it. I wasn't able to find that article anywhere. I'm going to play this for you, and I want to get your take on it. It is the fact that there's no meeting and he's talking like this is very weird, but I'm going to play it anyway.
That's true. 145% is very high, and it won't be that high. Not going to be that high. Uh, it got up to there. We were talking about fentanyl, where various elements built it up to 145. No, it won't be anywhere near that high. It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. It used to be zero. We were just destroyed. China was taking us for a ride, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're going to be very good to China. Have a great relationship with President Xi, but they would make billions and billions and billions of dollars a year, and they would build their military out of the United States and what they made. So that won't happen. But they're going to do very well, and I think they're going to be happy. And I think
Yeah, I have to tell you, I hate this line of logic, the stab in the back myth that let's say certain Americans go with. Oh my God, China is taking advantage of us. They're eating our lunch. It's like they've taken all of our money and they've built up their military. Answer that for me, please. I want you to give your take.
Well, I mean, it's such a lie, but it's so deeply embedded in the national security ideology. You can see that this is the story that they tell themselves, and it's all the story that trickles down into the general public. But essentially, it goes something like this. We helped a poor, impoverished, self-destructive communist China rise out of poverty, out of the goodness of our hearts. And then, like vipers who we warmed against our chest, they betrayed us, they turned on us and they stole their way up, they got everything from us. They stole our IP, our industries, our businesses, our jobs. And they are the reason we suffer, the reason why we're impoverished, the reason why the whole world is suffering. So there's so many layers of deceit and dishonesty and propaganda and ideology embedded in that. But let's break that down just a little bit, okay? First, the US did not help China. Until the 70s, it was actively trying to destroy China, actively trying to roll China back, multiple wars, a war in Korea, war from Myanmar, war from Taiwan, constant, and then constant internal disruption, trying to, create a guerrilla war in Tibet, and then now later in Xinjiang, etc. The US has constantly been trying to disrupt and destroy and roll back China. From the period of 1979 until the current moment, they sought what looked on the surface to be a kind of modus vivendi, or until 2011, a kind of modus vivendi, but it was also a plan for soft regime change. And if you ask the people, the foreign, the NatSec foreign security types, they will tell you, yes, we were expecting China to collapse and be absorbed. But during that process, as the US was doing trade with China, it was making out like a bandit. I mean, the US was profiting. Now, when I say the US, I mean the US ruling imperial elite was profiting, not the, industrial worker in Ohio. They were getting reamed up the wazoo. But the US ruling elite, they were making out like bandits. And so having made out like bandits and having created tremendous immiseration in their own country and having to deal with it, they're now saying, look, the person who is to blame is China. China did this to you, not us. Let me give you the analogy. Jamal, let's say that you and I have a business and we both do business with each other. You buy some of my things, I buy some of your things. Okay. Essentially, if we do business together, we are exchanging equivalents, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't go into any, negotiation. That's the whole notion of trade, barter, business. We are trying to, as much as possible, as much as the market allows, as much as we exclude, coercive external circumstances, we are trading equivalents. That means that theoretically, I benefit and you benefit, right? Now, the thing is, let's say I benefit and I make money and I send my kids to college and they're all doing well. And then I look at your family, or you look at your family, and all your kids are underfed, malnourished, and nobody's doing well. But somehow Jamal has a new tie and a new hat. And get this, he has a huge gun collection. Okay. What's going on here? Am I to blame for the undernourishment of your children? Did I steal the bread from your children's mouth? Or does it have something to do with the fact that you, Jamal, again, this is an analogy, but you were spending all of that on yourself, and buying expensive cars and yachts and, a huge armory while you were neglecting your own family. Okay. That is the situation that we find ourselves right now. And having done that, the United States wants to see if it can turn the blame and blame China. It's all China's fault. And so then they pick this trade and tariff war. And of course, as I said, you don't pick a trade war with China, just like you don't pick a land war with China. That's a fight you cannot win. And so this is one of the ways in which, the lie is just so insidious and dishonest.
That's why I call it stab in the back. It is something. It's almost like, as opposed to saying our oligarchs took advantage and made themselves massively rich.
Yes,
it's China's fault.
Mhm.
There's a level of racism built into it. And it's also looking at China and say, wait a minute, they're building high-speed rail. They're building their highways. They're building their roadways. Look at their cities. Oh my God, their cities are astonishing. And you look at our cities and it's like, okay, California has a homeless population that is ungodly. I mean, like hundreds of thousands of people living on the street. That is astonishing. There is no high-speed rail in the United States. If you go on the rail system, you can't even get from one side of the country to the other. The cities are in disrepute. And it's like, clearly, it's China's fault. They've been eating our lunch. Here's another one of Trump. Again, it sounds like he is having some kind of meeting that I am entirely unaware of. I think this is it.
We're talking about the gold.
Okay, right. Saying there's going to be a golden age when we make our deal with China.
I'm not, but 100% of all of these documents are being delivered. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, you said you're ultimately going to make a deal with China, but where do things stand right now? Have you talked to
I
him?
think my relationship, my relationship with President Xi is great. It's been great for a long time. We've had a very good relationship, and I think we'll make a deal with China. If we don't make a deal, we'll set it. We'll just set the number, and I think they'll want to be a part of the United States. We're doing great. This is the golden age, as Paul said. We're talking about the golden age. It will never be a time like this, in my opinion. And China wants to be a part of that too.
I love that. Have you spoken to him? Nah, but we have a great relationship. It's going to be a golden age. They clearly want to be a part of the United States. We have, this is going to be great. If they don't, we'll just set a number. That's all.
Let's think about that relationship. And there's an iconic moment that illustrates what that relationship was like. This was in 2017, I think, when Donald Trump invited President Xi Jinping and his wife to Mar-a-Lago. And it was essentially, a state banquet, full reception, all the, cut crystal and all of that. And then during, after the dinner, it's just, gorgeous, luxurious food, they served dessert, right? And they served this incredible chocolate cake. And as Xi Jinping was eating this chocolate cake, Donald Trump went up to Xi Jinping and said, "We have just launched 59 missiles into Syria, and I want you to know this." And they said that Xi Jinping, stopped eating. Okay, right? And this was a setup, right? This was a message to them. And if you recall, there was the Commerce Secretary at the time. He just bragged. He said that, we showed them. We made him choke on that delicious chocolate cake. and I think that was Wilbur Ross. But it was a message. It was saying that, we are madmen. We can do anything. Even as we're treating you nice, we're capable of incredible violence and cold-blooded murder. I mean, it's almost like a Greek tragedy, like, feeding, children to your partner or something. So I think that sets the tone of this good relationship. Yes, from Trump's mindset, they had a good meal together. He gave them chocolate cake, but underneath, the poison in that dialogue, that poison in that setup, using the wanton murder of innocent people as dinner entertainment, I think sends a message. And I think it sends the message that, you know, that the US is, it's not simply negotiating from a madman strategy, that there is a deep madness inside its ruling class. And then certainly it is not trustworthy or even agreement capable.
These people are sociopaths. I mean, like, that is, I did not know that. Wow, I did not know that. And waited till he started eating and said, hey, by the way, we just murdered a bunch of people, but all of these missiles we were firing.
Yeah. Over dessert, right? This was
wait for dessert.
This was the after dinner entertainment, right? And to make it even worse, Trump didn't even remember which country had launched the missiles at. He remembers the details of the chocolate cake and how amazing it was, but he said that he launched the missiles into Iraq. So,
oh, he's freezing. He'll be back. Don't worry. He will be back. Oh, there you are, KJ.
Okay, we may have. I think we.
We lost you just a little bit. It's okay. Look,
interference going on. But anyway, the missiles were launched
please.
into Syria. 59 Tomahawks. Yeah. So anyway, 59 Tomahawks were launched into Syria, but Trump didn't even know which country he had launched them into. He said that he had launched them into Iraq. And so when you have that level of stand, when you have that, level of inability to understand world affairs, just even basic geography, that's a very hard situation to do negotiations with. The other thing I'll say about negotiations with it, Trump had stayed negotiations with other countries for 90 days, right? Now, on average, it takes about 18 months to do one of these, tariff trade negotiations. 18 months. So he's going to do trade deals with 180 countries in 85 days. It's not possible. So this is, as we said, I've given this metaphor before, but it's like that chess amateur, who makes that move and then has to take his move back. This is the third move that they're taking back, right? Essentially, they have no moves. They have no strategy. The only strategy, I think, is that somehow they want to, it's in their mind to take down China some way or somehow. And we know that because Scott Bessent tried 3 times to take down China. This is his third time. 1997, when he was working for George Soros under the Quantum Fund, they did this run on Chinese currency, which this was the Asian IMF crisis. They brought down Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, even South Korea. They brought all these countries down, and they were moving on to China. They could not bring China down. They tried to short the currency, and the Chinese outwitted them because they were simply too big. But Scott Bessent tried to do that in 1997. He tried to do it again with his own hedge fund. And now this is his third time. This is his third bite at the apple, that he thinks that he can bring China down. This time, not simply, with speculation, but with tariffs and the entire apparatus of state. And he's still not able to do that. And you can see that he's tempering his language. He's backing it down. He's saying, we don't want an embargo, because what we have right now is a de facto embargo. And if you have an embargo, who loses? It's the US, which is getting endless goods from China. It's not China. The US market for China is actually not a big deal.
Mhm.
And so I think they're starting to understand that they have caught up. The dog has been chasing the truck. Now it's caught up with the truck and it doesn't know what to do.
This is dog is chasing the car. He doesn't know what to do when to catch it. This is fascinating. He is acting as if there is some kind of meeting with Xi Jinping that is in the future that he's perfectly aware of, and that they're just going to work out hammer out a deal because they have this great relationship. And as you point out, he is angling for that, not the other way around. It's not Xi Jinping beating down his door. That's not a call that's coming to Trump. It's like he's waiting for a phone call that's never going to come.
Yeah, it's
And
like it's like the teenager, who is waiting for the phone call, from her, your crush or something. It's like,
yeah,
why are they not calling me, right?
yeah.
So
In his
yeah.
mind, it's America. We can do whatever we want.
Hmm.
China is obviously going to contact me because obviously they need to, get a deal. And that doesn't seem to be the case. And it's just wild to me. Like he's having this meeting in the Oval Office and spinning this or trying to spin it when Brexit was very clear, like, this is unsustainable. We cannot keep this up. We have to stop this. In which case you get Trump saying, yeah, it's going to go down to something. But he's saying it in the context of a conversation with Xi Jinping that has never taken place, that is not being planned, and that up to this point, social media is just getting it wrong. It's weird. It's very weird. KJ,
Yeah.
man, you're fantastic. Thank you for this. I really appreciate your breakdown. I really appreciate your explanation of this. Thank you for pointing out that there is no meeting that is scheduled for May between these two, regardless of what is being put in social media. Xi Jinping, from my understanding, hasn't said anything about it. Less, and definitely not in the sense of we must go and contact Trump because we need to be in the American market. That doesn't seem to be the conversation. Would they, all things being equal, want to be in the American market? Or is, from China's point of view, it's better to decouple? What's the
I think they are. I think they're in two minds around it. I mean, if they can continue good relations, they want that. They want win-win relations with everybody. And trade, as I said, can be win-win. We're exchanging equivalents. Both parties can benefit. There's comparative advantage, etc. But if you're working from a flat Earth neo-mercantile theory, where you think that you have to have a trade surplus in order for you to have, national wealth, national strength, all of this stuff. I mean, this is stuff that was undone in the 1700s. Adam Smith wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations, and he was pointing out that this theory of mercantile, national wealth based on trade surpluses and bullion, etc. He was pointing out that that was wrong, that you build the wealth of nations through trade and through specialization and through division of labor. This is like, this is like hundreds of years old. This has been well worked out. And so they want to go back to mercantile theories. And the Chinese, as I said, are of two minds. On the one hand, they want win-win relations with everybody, with the United States included. They believe that, the world is big enough for everybody and that, this is mutually beneficial. But if the US has an agenda to undermine, to attack China, to embargo China, to sanction it, and to destroy it, which really is the real agenda, and it's been ongoing since 2011, since the Obama administration. If that is the real agenda, then China is willing to go to the mat, and they're willing to decouple, they're willing to embargo, and they will meet the United States, tit for tat, or more likely asymmetrically. They're aware that we're at this really, really dangerous moment where the empire is realizing that it's really losing its grasp. The center cannot hold, things fall apart, and that they really don't have cards, that the cards they have are bluffing, and that the US could be using this as an escalation to war. And if that's the case, as I said, China is sending the message, let's not go there. We've already had a war during the Korean War We beat you flat on your back when we had nothing. We were starved, impoverished. Only 1 out of 3 of our troops actually had guns. They were wearing sneakers in the snow, didn't have coats, and we still gave you the biggest defeat that you have ever had in your military history. And they're also saying, so don't go there militarily, and let's also not go there in terms of trade war economically, because once again, this is a war that you cannot win. But they're standing strong, and they're sending a message of resolve and strength. They're not going to be trifled with. It's no longer Mike Tyson, with the glasses and the lisp. It's the grown-up Mike Tyson with Hustamato in his back. Yeah.
I don't get the sense that Donald Trump knows anything about
Mercantilism.
mercantilism. Thank you. I don't get the sense that he's read Wealth of Nations. I think for him it's dominance. I think
Yes.
that's the thing that is in his mind. Dominance. I need to dominate. I need to be
He wants
strong.
he wants people to kiss his ass. That's what he
Yeah.
said, right? Yeah. So it's all about dominance. Correct.
Yeah, he just cares about dominance. I want, I'm going to bring Maloney here. She's going to kiss my ass. I'm going to have all of the people around me kiss my ass. I'm going to get countries to bow down to the power of America. And let's be honest, whether you're Obama, whether you're Joe Biden, whether you're Donald Trump, when you take on the mantle of president, you assume a role that in your mind, you're a master of the world. I think that is in their minds. I think it's in all their minds. How they express it may be different. Obama may be more cool. He plays basketball. He croons, right? He seems to get along with the people better. But he's still exerting dominance when he's dealing with other foreign powers and whatnot. Europe just are vassals in that sense. Trump has the mask off. And he doesn't go with the pretense of my friends here or my buddies. It's kneel. And at the point where the country doesn't kneel, okay, now we have a problem. The problem is, though, that you might have been able to get away with this in the 80s. We're in 2025.
Right.
You just lost the war in Ukraine that is still going on right now that you're trying to extricate yourself from. And now you've embroiled yourself into a trade war under the same mindset that got Europe and Joe Biden in that war in Ukraine. And you lost. It's just wild. They don't see the canaries in a coal mine. They don't put it together.
They're not putting it together, and there's also tremendous infighting. Hexeth is in trouble. There's just incredible. I mean, it's literally a crossfire hurricane that's going on there. But Trump talks about the art of the deal, but in this situation, he cannot make the deal because he doesn't have the cards. He doesn't have any power, and essentially, the fraudulence of the empire has been shown up. The curtain has fallen. The wizard behind the curtain is just that fat old man, and they can't do anything about it. I mean, you talk about Obama. Obama was a fraud from top to bottom, right? He was a professor at the University of Chicago for, I think, 12 years, 10 years. This was a guy, when he was professor of law at the University of Chicago, did not publish a single thing. Now, how is it possible that you are a professor and you don't publish anything, right? That's like working in a shoe store and never selling a shoe. It's not possible. Okay, something else is happening there. Well, actually, he did publish something. He published his autobiography, right? Dreams of My Father, right? And that was ghostwritten for him by, according to some sources, somebody from one of the members of the Weathermen. But anyway, the guy did not write anything. The guy was a fraud from top to bottom, and you knew he was a fraud the moment he brought Larry Summers onto his chief economic, counselor. So it was a fraud from beginning to end. And here we see Donald Trump. There's a kind of refreshing honesty because he just shows himself up for what he is, and that makes the score very clear. But of course, the deep state hates that because they hate his kind of flagrant, blatant, unvarnished demeanor and approach, which they want that dissimulation, that Obama type, slick, salesmanship. and he doesn't have that. It's for him, it's naked power concepts. It's what it's George Kennan. We are going to have to deal with naked power concepts. We'll have to do away with the niceties, and of course they hate that about him. But I think the cards are on the table, and clearly there are no cards. And Trump and Besant and even Navarro, I think they have to understand that they have to make a deal, and they have to make a deal with China. And along the way, they're going to have to eat quite a bit of crow.
Just to be clear, just one last question. What would that deal be? I'm super curious about what the deal would be. I mean, Trump is saying, well, we're going to have tariffs. China's taking on lunch, blah, blah, blah. But in real terms, in reality-based terms, what deal would Xi Jinping meet? I mean, would this be a deal on trade where we're taking X amount and giving X amount? Like, I guess I'm having difficulty figuring out what that connection would be.
Well, the Chinese demand has been remove the tariffs. And Chinese said, the tariffs are not benefiting you. They're not benefiting us. I mean, they're benefiting China certainly more. But as I said before, when you have $100 product sold in the United States, when Nassim Taleb, $88 of that goes to the United States, $12 goes to China. So if you cut out that trade, China has lost $1, the US has lost $7, possibly more, probably up to $12. It's a losing proposition for the United States. Right now, there's something like 64% of container traffic has been canceled because goods are not shipping, right? And we're going to feel that really soon. We're going to feel it on the shelves. 70% of all the products sold on Amazon come from China. And I assure you, anything that you buy, even if it's not directly from China, it has a supply chain that is connected to China. You think of a US car, your average car has 30,000 components. Even if they claim that is made in the United States, about 12,000 of those components were made in China. That is, the most, that's the most conservative estimate. And so it all comes back to the extraordinary manufacturing supply chain that China has built out. So it's in the US interest to make a deal and to see if they can calm the waters and to step back and to eat crow if necessary in order to make a deal.
But just to be clear, the deal would need to be zero tariffs or no tariffs on the products.
That's what the Chinese have asked. That's what the Chinese have demanded. Certainly, they're not going to tolerate having higher tariffs than the rest of the world. Right now, 145% tariffs on Chinese goods and minimal tariffs on the rest of the world. China has been singled out. That's not going to work. And the rest of the world is actually going to pivot towards China. You already see it in the Southeast Asian nations. Xi Jinping went to Malaysia and Cambodia and Vietnam. What is Vietnam doing right now? They're inviting China to march in the 50th anniversary of the ending of the Vietnam War. This is their, May Day success parade. They've invited the Chinese military to march. This is a first in history. Why? Because actually the Chinese sent 300,000 troops to Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Most people don't know this. And the Chinese sent a message again to the US leadership. They said, if you get involved in a land war with Vietnam, and if you encroach in North Vietnam, we will send, we will fight with Vietnam against you. And because they had that experience of fighting China during the Korean War, the US never invaded North Vietnam, not in any significant way. They bombed Laos, they bombed Cambodia, they tried to destroy the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but they never did a full frontal assault on North Vietnam. And that has to do with their memories of what happened during the Korean War. And so Chinese are sending a message, come to the table, zero tariffs, no discriminatory, tariff, and we'll see if the U.S. will, come and find a way to deal with it, or whether it is committed to decoupling and embargo. If that's the case, remember, China will simply peel off the rest of the world, and the US will have isolated itself. The chance that the US had to do that was the TPP 2015. Trump
Right.
nixed that right away. The TPP was a plan to isolate China. That Trump nixed that right away, and now he's trying to improvise something without any plans for it. He's leading with his chin, and now he's going to have a plan and negotiate and etc. later. Your sequencing is all wrong.
KJ No. Which is awesome. KJ No is a journalist, political analyst, writer, teacher, specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region, contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. You can get it at iacenter.org. KJ, also let people know where they can find you.
They can find me on the Breakthrough News Network. The show is called The China Report. And just another plug, I also did a show with Manila and Ted on the TMI show.
Did you?
Yes.
Both of them are awesome.
Yes, absolutely. And so we discussed some of these similar topics in detail. So I also recommend people go and check out the TMI show on YouTube.
Yeah, they go from 10 to 12, I believe,
Yes.
immediately after the show. Thank you for this, KJ. Always appreciate you, man. You have a good one.